This is my Grandpa Doug, one of the most well-read and interesting people I've ever met in my life. He graduated from Seattle Pacific College, or as it's now known, Seattle Pacific University, with a degree in religious studies. I've known him my whole life, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him for this video. Also, if you're one of my current subscribers and you're seeing this, you may be wondering why this is so different from my usual content. This is actually a school project for my AP US Gov class. If you're not interested in political and historical content, you're free to click off. And I know the futility of asking for this, but please keep it civil in the comments. So without further ado, let us begin. So when you were younger, where were you living?
I was born and grew up in north central Washington, a little town called Omak was where I grew up, O-M-A-K. I was born north of there in a town called Tonasket. It's a rural area, lots of logging, a lumber mill there, lots of farms, orchards, so agricultural work. The people there was a mix, but probably the majority of them would be conservative, Republican voters, if you will, probably by what we would call today moderate conservatives, not a lot of the radical conservatives that we see today.
I see. So what were your general political views when you were younger? Did they sort of align with the people of your town, or more so with your parents, considering if your parents were any different from the people in the town?
Well, and it's kind of funny because my parents, we talked about history, we talked about current events. I always watched the news, but they really didn't talk about their political affiliations. And I find out later that my mom was more Republican and my dad was more of a Democrat, but I didn't know that until much later. But yeah, my views tended to go along that line. I would support people like Richard Nixon, and then later I actually at first supported Ronald Reagan along those lines. But the other side of it was I was really appreciative, even at a young age, I was really appreciative of some of the things that were going on in the national realm, like passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Rights Act of, I think it was 1965 or 1966. I was also very appreciative of and understood why President Johnson proposed and got passed the Medicare law, where it provided guaranteed health care for senior citizens. So I was kind of a mixed bag at that point of my political views.
What was the sort of general talk around the town when it came to things like the Civil Rights Act?
What little conversations I heard around town was pretty much positive about the Civil Rights Act. People there didn't feel like it impacted them very much because we frankly didn't have a lot of African American people there. In fact, hardly any at all. We did live on the edge of an Indian reservation, and so we did have the Native American people there.
You studied religion in college, correct?
Yes, I did. Actually, in graduate school, my ambition at that point in my life was to be a preacher, and so I went to college at Seattle Pacific. It was college then. It's now a university there on Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. I actually studied psychology and was quite interested in studying human nature, and then went on to graduate school at what they call a seminary to get my training in religion. What I found most interesting about the study of religion was actually the study of church history. And looking back on it now, I realize it's because I was really most interested in human nature and how humans the teachings of religion and applied them within society. And obviously people have different ways of applying their religion, and I found that very interesting.
I actually found that relatively interesting as well. Did studying religion ever affect your political ideology?
Not so much directly, but I think probably the thing that affected from a religious standpoint, the thing that affected my political philosophies would be the teachings of Jesus himself. And, the Bible obviously has a lot of different teachings in it. Religions have a lot of different teachings, but I find the teachings of Jesus to be the ones, to be kind to one another, to be good to the poor, to provide health care. Now, he didn't teach us to provide health care, but he certainly gave us that example because he went around healing people.
In terms of separation of church and state, do you lean more towards separation or think the term's conjunction?
Definitely towards separation. Throughout the last 2,000 years, the church has been whenever the church gains political power, it gets corrupted. And, if you read the writings of Thomas Jefferson on that topic, I line up very much with him, that the church has no business being formally a part of governance, because gaining power also tends to corrupt. People in the 1600s went to war over those issues. People in parts of France and Switzerland would kind of followed the Baptist tradition, and people in Italy and other parts of France followed the Catholic traditions, and they would actually have the war. So I'm at the point where I say the church can teach what it wants, but the state needs to be totally separate from the church. Now, the church can influence the state if the church believes, for instance, that murder is wrong. Then the church certainly has a right, or the people within the church certainly have a right to convince legislators to pass laws that fit people or punish people for murdering other people. To me, that makes total sense. But to pass laws as to how you worship or how you do other religious functions is just totally absurd to me.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I would say that separation between church and state is absolutely necessary. And of course, power does always corrupt, at least from what I've seen in my 17 years alone. In the last, let's say, 17 years, what have your political views looked like, and how have they changed from when you were younger?
17 years ago time frame was when I was transitioning from thinking I was a moderate conservative to going ahead and just embracing a liberal philosophy. And it's primarily because I could see that those who held to conservative views, primarily the Republican Party, did not really have answers to the problems that society was facing. One example I'll use is immigration. President Bush was in office in that time frame 17 years ago, and he developed a proposal to Congress to actually solve many of the immigration problems. They were a little different than the Democrats wanted to do, but the Democrats could have gone along with them. But the Republicans who were in power at the time in Congress, absolutely, they just shut it down and said, no, we're not going to go along with any of this. And the same thing they're saying today, which is we just have to close the border. They just kept saying that, which obviously is an absurd position. So the other issue, or one other issue that was big in my mind at that time was health care. And 10 years before that, Hillary Clinton had come up with a plan to provide health care, basic health care to everybody in the country. And again, the Republicans totally shut it down. But what discouraged me about the conservative side was they did not come up with an alternative. All they said was, let's just keep doing what we've been doing all these years, because as far as we're concerned, it's working. Well, obviously it wasn't working. And so as I could see that conservative causes were not coming up with real answers, I could see that others on the other side of the aisle actually were proposing some answers if they could just get them passed.
It's kind of insane that it was like a problem back then, like 20, 30 years ago, and it's still a problem today. Like how we're still fighting for open borders and healthcare, and it's still continuing to be blocked by more conservative people.
Exactly.
Huh. You know, wow, that does open my eyes about certain quotes, like history doomed to repeat itself.
Every time, unless you study it good and decide to make a change.
Of course.
The other thing that had a strong influence on me throughout my upbringing and into my young adult years was the Vietnam War. I actually started out feeling like, well, I guess we have to stop communism. And there was that theory out there. But you could see over time that the US government was not willing to win the war, and they wouldn't go far enough to win the war. Now, I know now why. And the reason why is something that goes back to the days of Dwight Eisenhower, who was a very wise man and a very good president. Dwight Eisenhower said, after the creation of nuclear weaponry, limited war is never winnable, and unlimited war is totally unthinkable. And so any country that has the nuclear weapons has to go with limited war, because nuclear war is unthinkable and limited war is unwinnable. And that really puts, it even puts the conflicts today in perspective as to what Russia is trying to do in Ukraine. Their war is unwinnable, and their only way to win it is unthinkable. So that was one of the things I learned over my political life also.
Yeah, no, ever since I had like a somewhat of a grasp on knowledge when it came to nuclear weaponry and mutually assured destruction, I've really always just hated the thought of nuclear weapons overall.
Absolutely. Yep.
Do you have any current views on LGBTQ issues currently?
I think society needs to treat everybody equally. And I think regardless of whatever bin you place yourself in, or not even that, whatever bin you find yourself in, because people don't place themselves in those bins, I don't think. I think they find themselves in those bins. You know, I didn't choose to be heterosexual. I am heterosexual. And a homosexual person, I believe, does not choose to be homosexual. They find themselves in that bin. And so everyone needs to be treated identically or equally without distinctions. And let's just go to one example. Again, laws need to treat everybody equally. And the tax code in the United States of America treats married people and single people differently. You pay a different level of tax if you're married or if you're single. And I don't find that to be fair, but it's the case. And so when the laws were not allowing homosexual people to be married to each other, then that distinction was creating an unequal treatment of people who are not treated equally under the law, which is a guaranteed right provided in the 13th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution. And so they either need to change the law or treat everyone equally.
Yeah, thank you for summing that up for me. I entirely agree. Everyone does deserve to be treated completely equally. In my personal opinion, if we have to, like, let's say, rewrite parts of the Constitution or re-amend things, I think that those are the terms, then I think we should be allowed to go that far if it means equality for all people.
Right. And this is a situation where it comes back to church and state, because many churches, not all, many churches have some very definite teachings on that regard about their individual people's conduct as to whether, how they can express their sexuality. But in my opinion, the church does not have the right. They can ask their members to live by their standards, but they shouldn't be able to demand that all of society live by their standards. It's a very good illustration of the need for separation of church and state.
Yes, I fully agree.
You're just being too easy, Ethan.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I'm generally I'm a little bit surprised how much our views sort of line up, considering the age difference, experience difference, and overall difference of upbringing.
So you came to those opinions way earlier in life, and that's a whole lot better.
Yeah, I'm glad to have grown up in a place that's a lot more accepting.
Exactly.
So, when you vote for people, what's your general thought process?
My general thought process has to do with, first of all, I try to find out what their policies are. You know, would their policies align with my policies on all the major things we have out here? And secondly, I would look at their personalities and make a judgment on their personalities. If the policies of two different candidates are pretty much equally aligned with each other, I'd look at their personalities. How are they able to work with other people and that sort of thing? Again, coming back to my interest in human nature. I feel like how a person gets along with others probably makes a big difference in their ability to work in a political environment. But I wouldn't vote for someone that I thought was a good schmoozer if they had policies that I totally disagreed with.
Yeah, that would be in my own personal opinion, a absolutely terrible idea. When I'm eventually able to vote, which will actually be this next coming up election, I'm likely going to look at it a similar way. Obviously, they gotta have decent policies, and they gotta be able to charm the hell out of me.
Right.
But policy first. If you're gonna be running the country, you should be able to not only run it strong, but run it well. So, my next question before I get to this one final thing is, how active are you in general politics today?
Not terribly. I vote every chance I get. I will talk with folks if the subject comes up. I do a little bit of electioneering on Facebook occasionally.
Well, not being all that active on Facebook outside of the gun safety things, and I presume other things here and there, I remember one thing you told me, because I remember we were driving home one day, and I mentioned how I joined Twitter at one point, and you told me that you had actually gotten banned off of Twitter for messaging Congress people regarding their policies. Sorry, I wanted to bring that up because I do find it pretty funny. Well, also I understand why you did what you did, but that's also kind of funny.
Yep. Well, and the reason was they thought I was a bot.
Ah, yeah.
I copy and paste messages to multiple people in the same morning, and they thought I was a bot, so they blocked me.
That makes sense. Right.
I think it's funny.
I fully agree. That is funny. Okay, so one last thing before we wrap this interview up. This may be a personal thing for me. but when I was younger, I saw you without glasses for the first time, and I thought you looked like former presidential candidate Mitt Romney. Now that you've received LASIK treatment, do you agree that you have some physical similarities to the former presidential candidate?
I never thought of that, but yeah, kind of.
Sorry, yeah.
That's a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, dresses well, has good hair. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for doing this full interview with me.
You are welcome. Thank you for thinking of you and what you're growing up to be.
Well, thank you very much. I hope to see you soon, and once again, thank you for participating.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You know, I had a really fun time with that interview. Such a fun time that I decided to register to vote. You know, I knew this interview would be fun. I knew it would be interesting. But I didn't really think it would be this generally eye-opening. I used to see the older demographic as more conservative, more patriotic, in a less than good way. And I knew there were countless problems that have been going on in America for many, many years. But I didn't really think there were this many, and I didn't really think the older generation really cared, because they're gonna be gone soon. And they're gonna leave us with their mess to clean up. But in the end, what matters most is the future, and how everyone should be able to prosper in said future. And it makes me happy to see more people who share the same sentiment, especially those from an older generation who have already had their time in the spotlight. I'm gonna be 18 soon, which means I'm gonna be able to vote. And when I'm able to vote, I'm gonna make each one count, because I want to see the future prosper. And I hope everyone shares the same sentiment. We need to fight climate change. We need to fight social injustices. We need to make sure not one person is without a home. We need to make sure everyone can prosper in this world, no matter what it takes.